What's up, book nerds? My name is Tara, and I'm here to tell you why we should keep YA weird. Keep YA Weird is a campaign started by Andrew Smith, an author who is notorious for his weird YA novels. His original post listing the purpose for the campaign is listed below, and I've often talked about my love for Andrew Smith, in particular his novel Grasshopper Jungle, and he just represents everything that's great about weird YA to me. I think that weird YA novels are some of my favorites. I read a lot of YA literature, and you start to see the same predictable tropes and plots over and over again. So it's incredibly refreshing to read books that are wacky, unpredictable, and thought-provoking. Smith's challenge for Keep YA Weird is to come up with 5 weird YA books and share those under the hashtag Keep YA Weird. So for this video, I have picked out 5 of my favorite weird YA novels to share with you. And I've read and watched a lot of things on this already that have been posted on Twitter, and I've been a little bit surprised to see that a lot of people's picks include books that I wouldn't necessarily consider to be weird. And I don't want to criticize anyone else's choices here, but they seemed like a lot of just fantasy and science fiction books that are weird in the sense that they're not the reality in which we live today, but they're not really weird within the world of YA literature. I think this is because a lot of people just haven't read books that I would consider to be weird beyond science fiction and fantasy. Maybe these picks will encourage you to embark on bizarre literary journeys with me. The first book I want to share is by one of my favorite authors of all time, and this is Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future by A.S. King. Now, all of A.S. King's novels could be considered pretty weird, but for me, this one takes the cake. So in the story, Gloria and her friend are really bored one day, and they're sitting outside, and they find this dead bat. And for some reason they think like, hey, let's put this dead bat into a jar and leave it there and see what happens. And a couple of days later, they come back and they find that the bat has become petrified and liquefied and gross. So, that's kind of weird. That's kind of gross, but they take it to a whole nother level when they decide, and I don't know what inspires them to decide this, but hey, let's drink the bat. So they open up the jar and they both drink the petrified bat. Yeah, that happens, and it's really weird, and it gives them visions of the future. So they both find out that once they look at someone, they are able to see what happens to their descendants in the future, and they begin to write down this history of the future based on the visions that they see. So while this would be classified for me as strictly a contemporary novel, it explores many contemporary themes of coming of age and like the suicide of her mother. It all starts with a petrified bat that they drink, so that definitely puts it in the category of weird for me. Next up is Fly on the Wall by E. Lockhart, who is also one of my favorite authors. And this little book is one of E. Lockhart's lesser known books, but it's really one of her more bizarre ones because it is based on Kafka's Metamorphosis. So Gretchen Yee is very curious about boys, and she wants to know what happens inside of their heads because she doesn't understand them. And she makes a wish and some little magic happens and she becomes a fly. And not only does she become a fly, but she becomes a fly on the wall in the boys' bathroom. No, the boys' locker room. So she's hanging out in the locker room, listening to their conversations, hearing that, shocker, they are all actual human beings with real concerns, but she's also kind of like flying around and checking out their genitals and, looking at what they do in the shower and, anything that you might do if you were a 15-year-old girl and curious about boys. So definitely weird. Next up is a book I don't actually have. I read it, I think I checked it out from the library, but it is Beauty Queens by Libba Bray, and oh my goodness, this book is just a wacky thrill ride from beginning to end. It starts out with a airplane full of beauty queens, each representing one of the states in America, and the plane has crashed onto a deserted island. And most of the beauty queens die, but there are many that are left, and they're roaming around trying to figure out how to survive on the island. They've got like pieces of airplanes sticking out of their head, and it is just chaos because there's sort of a mystery, think Lost, but like crazy, and there's a lot of female sexuality that is just dying to get out. So you've got lesbians and bisexual and transgender beauty queens. You've got one girl who really loves to love herself. You know what I mean? Love herself loudly in the woods. And then you add in like some cross-dressing pirates, and it is just the epitome of weird. And a lot of Libba Bray's books are like this, weird. My fourth pick is Noggin by John Corey Whaley, otherwise known as the Teenagers with Cancer book that I enjoyed far more than The Fault in Our Stars. When Travis Coates discovers that he is dying of cancer, which is somewhere in his body, I think it's spread everywhere, he decides that he's going to participate in an experiment where they kill him early, or I guess they put him to sleep, cryogenically freeze his head, and separate it from the rest of his body to be attached to a cancer-free body at a later point in time. So this has got a whole lot of weird things attached to it because he expects that he's going to wake up 60, 70, 80 years in the future, but he actually only wakes up 5 years in the future. So it's almost like time traveling forward 5 years. Everyone is 5 years older, and here he is with his head attached to some stranger's body. So he's kind of dealing with figuring out where he fits into this world, where he can see what happened after he basically died. I mean, that's how everyone treated it, but also the weird fame that comes with being one of the first human experiments to survive and thrive under these conditions. Weird. And the final book is one that I don't actually have, but it is Tales from Outer Suburbia by Sean Tan. And take it from a guy who won an Academy Award for a short film based on one of his books. Life is weird. Tales from Outer Suburbia is a series of surrealist short stories all focused on the idea of kind of the bizarre life that's lived in the suburbs. It's actually Australian, so that's where his point of view originates. But I think that there's just something there for everyone. While these books are marketed towards young adults, they are picture books, so they can be appreciated by children. And I think that there's a lot there for adults, because every time I open Tales from Outer Suburbia, I just find that there's something new there. I don't fully understand all of his themes, but there's so much going on that I get closer to that point of understanding them every time I read the book. Very weird drawings, minimalist on the text, but definitely weird in the best way. It's no coincidence that these are 5 of my favorite books from 5 of my favorite authors, because I seek out the weird. I really enjoy weird books for all of the reasons I stated before. Andrew Smith's a really cool dude, and he's doing everything he can to keep YA weird, and I'm totally with him on that little campaign. As always, book nerds, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Otherwise known as the Teenagers with Cancer book that I otherwise known as the Teenagers with Cancer book that I enjarred. Well, now I'm just gonna say enjoyed.